At her dream wedding, I grinned as she called me old wallet. What happened next was incredible. Nothing could prepare Jake for that moment. Tiffany, glowing in white, approached the altar, and as she winked at him, old wallet slipped from her lips like the sweetest song. Yet, within seconds the reverie shattered. Can you believe she's marrying a simple mechanic? An icy voice from the back curled around his spine like smoke, dousing his pride. The words lingered in the air, dense and suffocating. They carved into him, igniting a tremor of rage that twisted his gut. Did this wealthy stranger really think she was better? Would he let this smug creature tarnish his sister's day? Jake clenched his fists under the stark orchid boutonnieres pinned to his suit. He was her protector. Always had been. But this was different. He was torn. Confrontation could rip the fragile happiness from Tiffany's eyes, yet silence would betray everything he stood for. Their upbringing wrapped in hard work and determination. He pictured their childhood-filled nights in their rickety garage. He worked tirelessly to ensure Tiffany's dreams didn't crumble like the rusted engines they once fixed together. Would standing up now eclipse the joy they'd paved with so many sacrifices? Jake's heart raced, memories flooding his mind. Every wrench turned, every tear shed, every penny he'd saved for her future. A mechanic's hands they were. An artist crafting life from metal, yet it all felt so meaningless in the face of this snob. What right had she to determine their value? Before they knew it, the ceremony ended, but the shadow of that comment loomed large, weighing heavy on his shoulders. At the reception, laughter filled the air, yet it all felt dissonant, each chuckle echoing his anger. He could spot the mocker, mingling with the elite, the starlit tables a stark contrast to everything he was. Heart-pounding, he noted how they dismissed their struggles, their sacrifices. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Fueled by unresolved indignation, he started piecing together a plan. Strategy was not reserved for the Fortune 500. He had taken classes for a reason. He was more than just a mechanic. He was determined. The thrill of being underestimated heightened the stakes, igniting his resolve. Would he dare to speak up, to reforge his family's honor in front of everyone who hadn't labored a day in their lives? Jake's muscles tensed as he locked eyes with the wealthy guest. This was the moment. This was where he could finally reclaim dignity. Would his voice quake in the face of judgment? He stepped forward, gathering the crowd's attention, and the world around him faded to a heavy silence. What if he failed? What if this risk shattered everything? He took a deep breath, bracing for the storm that was about to erupt, a confrontation that might determine their worth. Would he find the strength to defend his family against scorn, or would the weight of societal judgment crush him too? The silence was deafening as Jake's heart thundered in his chest. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, and for a heartbeat, he questioned the resolve he had felt just moments ago. The sly smile of the wealthy guest danced mockingly in his mind, urging him to remember where he came from, who he was, and what Tiffany had always meant to him. "Excuse me," he finally said, his voice surprisingly steady. "I think we need to address something." The murmurs started like the rustle of dry leaves, building into a cacophony as the crowd turned to him. Each face was an undefined canvas, some curious, others judgmental. A tight knot formed in his gut, but he pushed it down. "I'm the brother of the bride," he continued, careful to keep his tone steady. "And maybe you've heard I'm just a mechanic." He forced a slight smile, fighting against the wave of disdain he felt. "But I want to celebrate today not only my sister's marriage, but everything that has brought us here." Jake's gaze cut straight through the crowd, resting once more on the critic. This beautiful woman standing here dedicated her life to her dreams, and guess what? She has quite the rich history that doesn't come from a trust fund. He felt empowerment surge through him with every word, and with it came the bravery to expose the facade of superiority surrounding him. "Sure, I may fix cars for a living, but those skills, that work ethic, taught me about resilience and tenacity. I didn't inherit my success through privilege. I earned it through sweat and sacrifice." There was a palpable shift in the crowd's demeanor. A few people nodded their agreement, eyes reflecting newfound respect. He could feel the momentum change. For too long, people like you, he said, gesturing toward his adversary, have looked down on folks like us. But that stops here. Today we don't just celebrate Tiffany as happiness. We celebrate everyone who worked hard to succeed. We should be proud of our journey, no matter how humble it may seem. Jake watched the initial shock on the wealthy woman's face give way to confusion, then anger. It invigorated him. They were in different worlds, but one had to give way to the truth. So I implore you all, let us cherish the hard work that defines our lives, not the labels that people like to slap on us. The applause erupted like a firework, and with it came a mix of relief and exhilaration. Jake could feel the doubt dissipating. He had made his stand, and in doing so, had claimed a piece of his dignity back. Yet, as he gazed at Tiffany, whose eyes sparkled with admiration, another struggle shadowed him. He could sense the stares of the elite burn with judgment, but also a flicker of acknowledgement of his worth. But as the room reverberated with clapping, Jake realized there was more to be done. He would not just fight for dignity at this wedding. He would forge a path where he could uplift every so-called underdog who had ever faced scorn. He had tasted a new strength today, ignited by anger but tempered by the love for his sister. But the question lingered: what would this newfound confidence mean for the future? He had stirred something inside himself, a hunger for change that demanded pursuit beyond this one moment. What other battles awaited him? What doors would he dare to open now? As he stepped back, heart still racing, he knew one thing for sure: the path ahead would not be easy, but it would be his own to carve. Would he embrace the challenge, or falter under the weight of the expectations now set before him? The time had come to face the truth behind not only their worth, but also his a challenge neither he nor Tiffany could afford to ignore. Jake left the wedding reception with a surge of adrenaline still thrumming through his veins. The taste of triumph had spurred him into a lofty realm of possibilities, and with every step he took away from the venue, a new awareness settled around him like an unfamiliar cloak. Today was not just a momentary victory. It had ignited a curiosity within him, challenging the walls he had quietly accepted for so long. As he stepped into the cool night air, the cacophony from inside faded away, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. The stars twinkled down like a reminder of the vast world beyond the confines of judgment and preconceived notions. Jake felt the weight of expectation still pressing upon him, but now he wanted to redefine it, to reshape what it meant to be viewed as just a mechanic. His phone buzzed with a text from Tiffany. "Jake, I'm so proud of you. What you said tonight. It was incredible." Her words sparkled like the stars above, but they also pulled on the heartstrings of his aspirations. He didn't want his sister's pride to be a fleeting sentiment built on a single speech. He needed to cultivate it into something real, something lasting. He contemplated what he could achieve. There had to be more than fixing cars. He remembered his childhood dreams of engineering, of creating something innovative, something that could elevate him beyond the grease-stained coveralls he wore. What if he dared to explore those dreams once more? What if he used the momentum from tonight to forge a new path entirely? As he pushed his way through the deserted streets towards home, Jake felt the gnawing urge to learn. How far could he go if he honed his skills in engineering? He had spent nights under the hood, his hands covered in oil, but what if that grit translated into something bigger? Ideas began to bloom in his mind like wildflowers breaking through concrete and automotive design. A product that could help his community. Jake had always seen himself through a narrow lens, his identity entwined with his profession, but perhaps it was time for a broader perspective. He could take classes, network with other aspiring engineers, or start attending events related to innovation in the automotive field. The potential right at his fingertips invigorated him with fleeting nerves, yet they were accompanied by an equally strong resolve. He was ready to reclaim his identity and mold it into something more valuable. Yet lurking beneath this wave of ambition was a question that wouldn't fade. Could he balance this pursuit with the everyday demands of life? The rigorous hours spent at the garage were routine and provided a sense of security. The dichotomy of diving into uncharted territory seemed daunting. In that very moment of reflection, he halted at a street corner, eyes flicking toward a pamphlet stuck to a lamppost. Local tech symposium coming soon, innovators wanted. The words danced in bright print, and with a sudden swell of determination, he plucked the flyer off the pole. It wasn't merely a calling. It was a ticket to his future. A rousing affirmation that stepping forward could unlock doors he had never imagined. Yet the gnawing thought nagged at him: what would the wealthy peers from the wedding think of his aspirations attempting to disrupt their world? Would they dismiss him as just a mechanic, or see the spark of a true innovator? As he clutched the flyer tightly, heart thrumming with renewed purpose, Jake realized he stood at the precipice of choice. One thing was certain. He was no longer willing to occupy the shadows of someone else's perception. The darkness of uncertainty sprawled before him, challenging yet exhilarating. He needed to seize this opportunity. That symposium could be the turning point. But would he fully embrace what it meant to stand and fight for his newfound identity? With that determination swirling in his spirit, he stepped confidently towards his next chapter, aware that regardless of the consequences, he was ready to enter a world he had only dreamed of before. The dawn broke with a soft glow, and the world felt more vibrant than it had in years. Jake stirred awake, pondering the potential of the day ahead. The flyer still lay on his kitchen table, and its bold lettering felt like an unyielding reminder of the challenge that awaited him. He took a deep breath, feeling charged with purpose. The stakes were high. If he truly wanted to shift the trajectory of his life, he could not shy away. After breakfast, he donned his grease-stained overalls and headed to the garage, but this morning was different. Instead of the usual autopilot routine, he felt the flutter of anticipation. History was his foundation, but he no longer wished for it to be his identity. The sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating workstations and unfinished projects. As he reached for a wrench, a thought struck him. What if he could innovate within the garage itself? He could identify inefficiencies in the repair processes that plagued their workflow. As he grimly tightened bolts on an engine, ideas wormed their way into his mind, streamlining parts acquisition, perhaps improving the diagnostic equipment. It stirred a passion that had been dormant for too long. Here he could merge his hands-on experience with newfound ambitions. Throughout the day, he pushed himself to remain focused not only on repair but on conceptualizing these innovations. However, the excitement was often punctured with doubts. He envisioned himself presenting at the symposium but feared ridicule. What if his peers viewed him as an imposter, a man attempting to redefine himself without the credentials to back it up? At lunch, Jake joined his colleagues, desperate for normalcy amidst the existential storm. Their banter was light, but he felt detached. Their conversations a stark reminder of the mundane he longed to escape. One of the mechanics teased him, "What'll you do, Jake? Design the next Ferrari while you're at it?" The laughter that followed stung, though he managed an easy grin. Their impressions of him would soon morph if he truly committed to this dream. Still, the weight of that teasing lingered, gnawing at him. Back at the garage, a slow sense of determination overtook him. Amidst the cacophony of tools and machinery, he began to sketch out his ideas. If he was to develop a comprehensive proposal for ideas to implement new workflow techniques, he needed to accumulate knowledge and structure his thoughts. He spent the evening devouring online resources about automotive innovations and engineering principles. Each click led him deeper into a world that had always felt just beyond reach. With every article read and video watched came a new sense of competence. Perhaps it wasn't just about design. It was about understanding the underlying principles that drove those designs. The power of learning ignited a fire within him that burned away remnants of self-doubt. However, that night as he lay in bed, the profound realization struck him. Knowledge alone wouldn't be enough. He'd have to share his ideas. He'd need to present them to colleagues, and perhaps even to the public at the symposium. Would they appreciate his passion, or dismiss him as just that mechanic? It filled his mind, oscillating between hopes of acceptance and fears of rejection. Determined, Jake resolved not to back down. He would prepare meticulously, forging his ideas into a cohesive vision. It wasn't merely about getting applause. It was about validating his place in a world that once seemed exclusive to those with formal accolades. As he drifted off to sleep, one thought illuminated his mind. This was only the beginning, and now, it felt like he was on the edge of something much larger. Tomorrow would bring new encounters, new challenges, and the first step toward his showdown at the symposium, a proving ground not just for his ideas but for himself. Jake, the mechanic who would break free from the shadows. The weight was daunting, but the call to rise echoed in his ears. Would he soar or falter? The journey ahead stretched long, and the clock was ticking. The next morning, Jake awoke with a curious blend of dread and excitement buzzing through him. Today was not just another day. It was the day he would start transforming ideas into action. As he dressed, the weight of the impending presentation scribed every thought with urgency. He raced through his morning routine, barely tasting his coffee as he rehearsed his pitch in his mind. Arriving at the garage, he felt the familiar rush of adrenaline mixed with the gnawing fear of judgment. The chatter of gears turning and tools clanking was nearly drowned out by his thoughts. Vision blurred between his tangible surroundings and the image of himself standing beneath the bright lights of the symposium, articulating concepts that began as mere notions on a sketch pad. He was greeted by Kyle, one of the seasoned mechanics, who eyed him with intrigue. "You're awfully chipper today, Jake. What's cooking?" the older man asked, amusement dancing in his eyes. Jake hesitated. Did he share the seed of his dreams, or keep them veiled in uncertainty? A part of him craved validation, yet vulnerability felt perilous. "I've got some ideas brewing," he replied, the words tumbling out more confidently than he felt. Kyle's expression shifted from humor to curiosity. "Let us hear it. You've been a quiet one, might as well talk about it," he said, leaning against a toolbox as if inviting Jake into camaraderie. Jake felt the walls close and unsure whether to retreat or step into the light. The inner dialogue grew louder, a cacophony of self-deprecation and resolve. In that moment, curiosity overpowered fear. He began to articulate some of his ideas: a smoother parts ordering system, better diagnostic tools. With each sentence, he noted Kyle's faint nods and thoughtful expressions. "What about the costs?" Kyle pressed, skepticism woven into his curiosity. "You know, those ideas sound expensive." This was at the moment where hope collided with reality. Jake's stomach twisted. Did he even know the figures? Did he have the guts to back his dreams with data? "I'll figure that out," he answered, though the confidence drained slightly. Kyle chuckled softly. "Jake, I've known men smarter than you who couldn't figure costs. You might want to think this through, buddy." The laughter felt less playful and more stinging. The air thickened, and Jake found himself standing at an unmarked crossroads once more. Did he retreat into silence, or would he harness this moment to propel him? Deciding on the latter, Jake excused himself to review the proposal he'd begun compiling the night before. Sticking his head into his workspace, he scrubbed for every detail that would support his innovations. This meant diving deeper. He allowed the discomfort of uncertainty to fuel him rather than hinder him. Lunchtime rolled around, and instead of the usual gathering, Jake sought solace outside, eager for fresh air and clarity. The sunlight warmed his skin as he paced the parking lot, rehearsing his pitch like an actor preparing for an opening night. He envisioned colleagues nodding along, intrigued rather than dismissive. But just beneath that hope simmered a fear. What if they rejected him outright? What if Kyle's laughter wasn't an outlier? Every time doubts crept in, he turned them back into motivation. He had the knowledge, he just had to present it correctly. As he thrust his hands into his pockets, a thought emerged. Not all innovation required grand funding. Sometimes it was about engaging minds and utilizing existing resources. When Jake returned to the garage, determination coursing through his veins, the rest of the day solidified his resolve. He pored over costs for materials, toyed with budget worksheets, and even approached colleagues to gauge their initial reactions. The internal battle simmered between fear and ambition, but every discussion chipped away at the barrier imprisoning his creativity. The timer on his internal clock ticked, leading him toward the symposium. His heart raced in anticipation and anxiety. As evening approached, Jake stood before a mirror, straightening his collar with resolve. He charged himself with a single mantra: ideas born from passion could soar. But just as confidence peaked, a shadow loomed, an image of his past self, passive and unremarkable. Jake had battled with disbelief for too long. The next day could break him or usher in a different world. And with that thought, he glanced at the flyer still pinned to the refrigerator. The question loomed like an unanswered riddle. Did he dare to step into the spotlight, embracing all he could become? The challenge set before him echoed louder. Would he find the courage to overcome? Jake awoke before sunrise, the soft glow of dawn creeping through the blinds. Today was a new beginning, or the culmination of an arduous journey. As he dressed, a mixture of excitement and anxiety knotted his stomach, a feeling he was starting to recognize as both familiar and invigorating. Each piece of clothing carefully chosen today, he would not hide in the shadows. He arrived at the garage, heart pounding like a hammer against metal. The sounds of machinery were punctuated with his thoughts, each clang a reminder of what was at stake. He steeled himself, hovering at the threshold of his workspace. The air crackled around him. Today might change everything. Gathering courage, he stepped inside. Noticing Kyle nearby, Jake recalled the skepticism embedded in his mentor's tone. "You might want to think this through, buddy." Those words haunted him, but they also fueled him. It was a chance to prove something not just to Kyle but to himself. "Hey Jake, you look energized today," came the cheerful voice of Tina, a fellow mechanic who often provided a welcome contrast to Kyle's gruff demeanor. "Trying to get there," he admitted. "Have you got a minute? I'd love your thoughts on something." Her curiosity sparked. Tina put her tools down and motioned for him to share. As he delved into his ideas about efficiency and innovation, he saw genuine interest forming in her gaze. As he spoke, he felt the tension within him release. The uncertainty was morphing into confidence, and the more he articulated, the clearer his vision became. "Those sound promising, but you need numbers to back this up, Jake," she cautioned. "People love ideas, but they want to see the practicality." Nodding, he acknowledged the truth in her words. Ideas had potential, but presented without concrete figures, they risked being just that, hazy dreams. The knot tightened again, but this time it transformed from a burden to a spark, igniting a clear action plan. After a quick lunch, he secluded himself in the corner office, spreading out papers and laptops like a tactical battlefield. Formulas and spreadsheets, tools he once avoided like the plague, began making sense. The fear that had once paralyzed him slowly morphed into exhilaration. For the first time, he felt in control, armed with more than just concepts. He was building a bridge between ideas and execution. As the day grew darker and the garage quieted, Jake meticulously crafted his proposal. He calculated feasible budgets, engaged with colleagues to validate his concepts, and marveled at his evolving grasp of logistics. But one looming shadow remained. He still hadn't presented to Kyle. If he was to truly set his ideas in motion, gaining Kyle's endorsement was critical. Later that night, Jake stood at home, papers sprawled around him, propping up the proposal like a shrine. A sense of pride washed over him. Each figure echoed countless hours spent wrestling with self-doubt and frustration. Yet the shadow of intimidation loomed as he envisioned Kyle's reaction. It was late, and the world outside was quiet. Jake felt an unfamiliar calm settle over him. He was ready to confront that obstacle. Tomorrow would be his day, the opportunity to stake his claim and deliver the pitch he'd been crafting. As he browsed a website on innovative business strategies, his heart beat wildly. "If I can just convince him," he murmured, rallying his final defenses. A revelation sparked. He had transformed. Even if Kyle proved unimpressed, he could no longer be defined by the limitations he once accepted. With renewed vigor, Jake closed his laptop and prepared for bed. But amidst the comfort of his routine, a realization struck. Beyond Kyle, there existed a greater audience awaiting his insights. The symposium wasn't just a venue, it was a battleground for his newfound identity. Would he step onto that stage, manuscripts in hand, ready to challenge convention? The dawn of that next day promised not merely opportunity, but the very essence of self-discovery. And deep within, a singular thought nestled in the core of his ambitions. If he didn't conquer the fear of judgment today, would he ever? Before the sun peeked over the horizon, Jake's resolve solidified. The quiet of the early morning wrapped around him, but he felt an electric charge racing through his veins. Today was the day he would finally step into the light. He donned the attire he had carefully selected. A crisp shirt, fitted pants, and polished shoes. It was more than just clothing. It felt like armor, equipping him for the confrontation with Kyle. As he made his way to the garage, he rehearsed his proposal in his mind, turning concepts into a narrative he could deliver with conviction. Each step echoed his determination. Today wasn't merely about seeking approval, it was about announcing his evolution, claiming his space as a professional. Entering the garage, the familiar cacophony of machinery greeted him, but it was infused with a fervent energy. He spotted Kyle by the main workstation, engrossed in fixing an engine. This was at the moment he'd been anticipating. "Morning, Kyle," Jake called, forcing a steadiness into his voice. Kyle looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "You're here bright and early. What's on your mind?" Jake took a deep breath, cleared the clutter of anxieties and approached with purpose. "I've put together some ideas on enhancing our workflow and improving efficiency. I'd love to get your feedback on my proposal." The words flowed more easily than he anticipated. "All right, let us see what you've got," Kyle replied. Skepticism etched into his expression as he gestured to a table nearby. Setting down the carefully organized documents, Jake began to explain. He highlighted the gaps in their current processes and presented data that demonstrated the feasibility of his ideas. He could feel the tension coursing through him as Kyle's brow furrowed, but instead of faltering, he pressed on. Each statistic bolstered his confidence, fueling a bigger, bolder vision. That skepticism slowly morphed into intrigue. As Jake delved deeper, weaving a narrative of opportunity and efficiency, Kyle's expression began shifting. Jake's hands moved animatedly, detailing hotspots of inefficiency that could be addressed, the potential savings, and even improved job satisfaction for the team. "Interesting," Kyle remarked, leaning back, arms crossed, as if in contemplation. "You've clearly done your homework." But Jake wasn't finished. Anticipating doubt, he preemptively dangled the projected outcomes that he had painstakingly calculated. Graphs, timelines, and a bare-bones budget formed a firm basis for discussion. He could sense a change. Kyle was listening with intent now. When he reached the conclusion of his pitch, a fragile silence hung in the air. Inside, Jake's heart raced. The confrontation felt monumental. This was not just about a proposal, it was a test of his newfound identity. "Okay, I'll admit it," Kyle finally said, breaking the quiet. "You've put a lot of thought into this." But he hesitated. "The real question is, can you actually execute these ideas?" Jake felt a wave of tension ripple through him. His self-doubt clawed at the edges of his thoughts, but he quickly intercepted it. "I believe I can. I'm ready to take the lead and involve the team in implementation. We can collaborate on refining these ideas." The challenge was clear, and it stirred something within him. This was no longer just about proving himself to Kyle. It was about proving to himself that he was capable of far more than he had previously ventured. Kyle leaned forward, an intrigued glimmer in his eye. "Let us not get ahead of ourselves. If you're serious about this, we'll schedule a meeting with the whole team. Gather everyone's input on your plan." Relief washed over Jake, but his heart still pounded with anticipation. He had crossed a significant threshold, possibly solidifying his role in a way he hadn't dared to hope for. "Thanks, Kyle," Jake replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "I appreciate your support." As he walked away, an unexpected wave of excitement surged through him. This was just the beginning. The culmination of his internal struggles had culminated in tangible opportunity, a chance to not only present his ideas but to inspire change. The questions bubbled within him. How would the team react? Would they embrace these innovations? The road ahead appeared daunting yet exhilarating, presenting a canvas on which he could paint his future. In that pivotal moment, he realized his only limits were the ones he imposed on himself. And as he stood at the threshold of this new chapter, the full weight of his journey settled into clarity. Courage would be his most valuable asset. With a newfound determination flooding his thoughts, he pondered the most critical realization of all. If this meeting marked the dawn of his professional revolution, what might he uncover next once his ideas took flight? As the hours sped by, Jake's anticipation grew. It was a heady mix of excitement and nervous energy. The impending meeting loomed larger in his mind, each thought sharpening into a focus he hadn't expected. Moving with an urgency that felt foreign yet exhilarating, he prepared for the team gathering. This wasn't just another meeting, it was a potential inflection point in his career. He arrived early, setting the conference room to his liking. The pristine whiteboard felt like a canvas, ready for ideas and collaborative spirit. Each detail mattered. The way the chairs were arranged, the layout of the documents strewn purposefully before him. He sought not only to present a proposal, but to create an environment that fostered openness, a space where ideas could flourish without judgment. As the team began to filter in, he caught snippets of conversations that rattled his confidence. What if they saw his ambition as a threat? What if they remained entrenched in their old habits? Jake swallowed the rising doubt, reminding himself of the effort he had invested in this project. He was no longer the hesitant worker yearning for recognition. He was the architect of potential change. The room filled slowly, and as familiar faces settled in their seats, he realized this was his moment to establish his newfound authority. "Good morning, everyone," Jake started, projecting a steady tone that belied the current war in his mind. "Thanks for gathering today. I'm excited to share some ideas on how we can transform our workflow for the better." A collective murmur of surprise rippled through the room. His confidence darkened the cloud of skepticism. He stood before them, feeling the weight of their expectations. Kyle nodded approvingly, a wordless gesture of support that thawed Jake's earlier anxiety. The presentation began. Jake spoke with passion, sharing his observations on inefficiencies that stymied their progress. As he moved through the data, he could see reactions flicker across the faces of his colleagues' curiosity, confusion, and then, finally, nods of understanding. He delivered each point with an intensity that surprised him, revitalizing the room with enthusiasm, as he tapped into a reservoir of motivation that had felt dormant for too long. Yet, as he illustrated the potential changes, questions surged from the team, some challenging, others skeptical. "What makes you think this will work? We've always done it this way," one of the more seasoned mechanics interjected, arms crossed defiantly. "That's exactly why it must change," Jake replied, the fire igniting behind his words. "We can't stay stagnant and expect better results. Being comfortable means growth is stunted. We owe it to ourselves and this company to innovate, to thrive." The atmosphere shifted. He could sense the tide turning, skepticism giving way to contemplation. As discussions deepened, those who had initially been resistant began offering their insights, feeding off Jake's contagious passion. Collaborating in real time felt intoxicating, transcending the clutches of doubt that had dogged him earlier. By the time the meeting concluded, Jake had rallied a shock team, generating genuine interest in collective brainstorming sessions and the forthcoming changes. They didn't just accept his suggestions, they became invested in them. Yet, hidden under the surface, a new apprehension settled. He had won their attention, but would he retain it through the implementation? "Great job," Kyle offered, clapping him on the shoulder as the group dispersed. "You showed real leadership out there." The compliment stirred an ambivalent mix of pride and anxiety in Jake. For the first time, he recognized the slender thread that woven through success: accountability. He had inspired others, yet with that came the expectation to deliver. Could he remain true to his vision while shouldering that responsibility? As he sifted through the aftermath of his triumph, Jake felt invigorated yet oddly unsettled. The thrill of accomplishment was dawning, yet it was tempered by the shadow of what lay ahead. Could he really see this through successfully? The reality was clear: there would be heavy lifting ahead, a series of unforeseen challenges waiting on the horizon. But there was no turning back. Losing momentum would only negate his progress. With renewed clarity settling within, Jake realized he faced not just a professional turning point. He was also on the cusp of a personal awakening. How far was he willing to push both himself and the team to bring about this transformation? As he gazed out the window toward the horizon, he wondered, was he truly prepared for the trials that would test his resolve? The moment of reckoning was approaching, and deep down, he knew it would redefine him once and for all. The days following the meeting unfolded like a paradox. On one hand, the energy from the successful presentation lingered in the air, a growing momentum rippling through the team. New discussions flourished among colleagues, as if Jake's words had planted seeds that were now sprouting into innovative ideas. On the other hand, an unease settled heavily in his gut. He had ignited a fire, but would it burn out or warm the room? Jake devoted long hours to the logistics of implementation, poring over plans, data, and any resources he could find. Yet, every time he felt a measured stride toward progress, the specter of what lay ahead clouded his mind. Each decision opened more avenues and more doubts. What if the team lacked the commitment? What if the change produced more chaos than clarity? He knew discussions would soon transform into action, and action would inevitably demand accountability not just from him, but from the entire team. This haunted him. Would his colleagues maintain the same fervor when they faced the resistance of old habits? How could he maintain their initial excitement? One specific task loomed large: securing buy-in from the more entrenched mechanics, those who had woven routines into the fabric of their work. Could he draw the reluctant into his vision? As he pondered this, a name crept into his mind: Frank. The veteran mechanic, fiercely loyal to the way things have always been, would likely spearhead opposition. It was an uncharacteristic move for Jake to confront a colleague rather than a project. However, he understood the necessity. A personal meeting with Frank loomed on his agenda, and it felt far more daunting than presenting to the entire team. The sun dipped low when he found Frank in a corner of the shop, bent over an engine like a blacksmith shaping molten iron. The whirs and clanks of machinery surrounded them, and for a moment, Jake felt swallowed by the familiar sounds of his workplace. It was an anchor, a reminder of the stubborn yet proud culture they upheld. "Hey Frank, do you have a second?" Jake initiated, surprised at the steadiness in his own voice. Frank grunted, eyes still fixed on the engine. "Yeah, Jake. What's up?" Jake took a breath, pushing through internal hesitations. "I wanted to chat about the changes I proposed." He shifted his weight, meeting Frank's steady gaze. "I know you've been doing things a certain way for a long time." "This S&T about me, kid," Frank interrupted sharply, his brow furrowing. "You think you can come in here and tell us how to do our jobs? We've been getting things done just fine." "No," Jake countered, his voice steady despite a surge of anxiety. "It's not that I want to undermine your experience or the way things are done. But the data doesn't lie. If we don't adapt, we risk falling behind. I'm asking for your help to move forward, not to dismiss what's been successful in the past." For a long moment, Jake held the silence, barely breathing. In his chest, a mix of hope and fear battled for dominance. Would this man see him as an ally or an adversary? Frank's expression softened slightly, but shadows of skepticism lingered. "And how do you propose we change that without upset? You think it's easy?" Jake let the moment settle, choosing his next words deliberately. "It won't be easy. Change never is. But I believe if we adapt together, if everyone collaborates, we can actually improve our efficiency." He pressed on, tapping into that relentless energy. "We could save time and effort not just for the company but for each of us. I want to innovate, not obliterate." The tension sliced through the air. Frank scrutinized Jake as if weighing his sincerity against years of routine. Discomfort rippled between them, igniting a conflict that was far deeper than simple mechanics. It was about evolution, about legacy. Just when Jake thought Frank might turn away, he leaned back against the engine, a conflicted consideration flickering across his face. "You're pretty passionate about this, I'll give you that," Frank finally muttered, his voice deeper than before. "But don't think it'll be easy. This isn't about wanting things to change. Everyone will have to pull their weight, and that means confronting fears and expectations from the past." Jake felt a new ember of determination ignite within him. The conversation had shifted. It was a first step toward a long journey. "I'm in it for the long haul, Frank. But I need you alongside me. Together we can redefine how we work." The flicker in Frank's eyes offered a glimmer of hope, yet Jake recognized the enormity of the challenge ahead. How many others would resist the change, and what would that resistance demand of him? There was no certainty left, just the relentless question of whether he could lead through this turbulence. As they stood in that charged silence, the reality settled hard on Jake. He wasn't just fighting for improvement, he was fighting for a collaborative culture that could preserve the past while embracing the future. And with that realization came an unsettling mantra. Each voice mattered, and every choice he made would be crucial. Looking back at Frank, Jake knew he was about to test not only the dynamics of the team but the very essence of his own leadership. The looming challenge escalated with every heartbeat, pushing him toward an inescapable conclusion. The time had come to face the doubt head-on and direct the team's transformation towards a shared vision. The stakes were higher than ever, but Jake remained resolute. He had stepped into a realm of responsibility that could either fortify his resolve or shatter it entirely. Which path would he choose to walk? And how far would he go to see the transformation realized? With the weight of the moment pressing against him, he contemplated the possibilities as questions wound tightly within his thoughts. For the first time he realized. The true measure of leadership wasn't just in sparking change but in nurturing trust amidst the resistance. The next few weeks proved to be a relentless whirlwind, as Jake navigated the complexities of implementation with his colleagues. Conversations flowed, ideas exchanged, but a palpable tension crackled in the air as tradition wrestled with innovation. Frank's cautious pragmatism began to thaw ever so slightly, but others remained firmly entrenched in their reservations. Jake worked tirelessly to cultivate relationships with team members, proving himself not only as a mechanic, but as a change agent ready to bridge the gap between legacy and forward thinking. Each meeting was a balancing act between facilitating dialogue and providing data that emphasized the importance of the initiatives they had proposed. One afternoon, as he gathered around a makeshift workspace filled with design sketches and workflow systems, Jake witnessed a shift. Tina, who had once merely nodded along, leaned in and engaged Frank in conversation, voicing concerns that had previously been whispered in the shadows. "Frank, I know we rely on our methods, but Jake has some solid points about efficiency. What if we tried it just for one project to see how it goes?" Jake's heart raced as the hope began to flicker, battling against the frustrations he felt during earlier discussions. It became evident that Tina's voice, empowered by Jake's conviction, resonated with others, striking the right chord between fear and curiosity. Suddenly, there was a palpable energy in the room, an openness that hadn't existed before. The decision to pilot one of Jake's proposed strategies brought a wave of collective relief. They would trial the changes in a controlled environment, while retaining the safety net of their conventional approach. The shift didn't eradicate challenges overnight, but it ignited a collective enthusiasm that Jake found intoxicating. As the trial period started, Jake stayed close to the action, guiding his colleagues and addressing concerns in real time. Frank was initially skeptical, yet Jake noticed the resolve building within him. Slowly, Jake's vision was being sculpted into reality, with each tweak and adjustment further legitimizing his efforts and instilling confidence amongst the team. One Friday afternoon, nearly a month after implementing the new system, Jake gathered the team for a review meeting. Reviewing the metrics reflected a profound improvement in workflow efficiency. He could hardly contain his excitement as he shared the accomplishments: less downtime, quicker diagnostics, increased productivity. The tide had turned. "See," he exclaimed, gesturing enthusiastically across the room. "This is what we can achieve when we unite." Applause broke out among the team, resonating like a crescendo of acknowledgement that flowed freely, silencing the internal doubts that once gripped him. Kyle, observing from the sidelines, stepped forward. "We've all witnessed substantial improvements. Well done, Jake." The compliment felt heavier than just surface praise. It embodied the recognition he had hungered for, solidifying the transformation he had started. Yet, as Jake reveled in the moment, he sensed a greater truth dawning within him. This wasn't just a victory charted on a spreadsheet, nor merely an accolade from superiors. It was a profound realization: the ability to guide others through transformation, to confront fears collectively, and to build trust preserved their progress long term. Leading wasn't about emerging as a sole authority, but as a catalyst for collaboration. Torn between jubilation and reflection, the echoes of applause faded as clarity settled in Jake's heart. He saw himself not only as a mechanic but as a leader, ready to shape a culture that upheld both progress and the wisdom of experience. That evening, after the day's victorious trials, Jake stood outside the garage, the familiar sound of murmurs echoing comfortably behind him. The twilight air wrapped around him like a protective shroud, infused with a profound satisfaction. He grasped the knowledge that he wasn't just fixing inefficiencies, he was constructing a foundation that could withstand the test of time. Jake leaned against his car, thoughts swirling as he considered the future. Today's triumph was not an end. It was merely a chapter within a greater narrative. As he looked up at the stars, he realized how deep resonated his journey of transformation, each challenge a stepping stone, each victory a testament to perseverance. In that moment, he understood that empowerment was iterative. It required constant nurturing and effort. He felt a resolute pride swell within him, one born from hard work and tenacity, a feeling that flared brightly as he whispered promises to himself. He would carry this momentum forward and nurture an environment where innovation thrived, where every voice could break free of constraints. And as he drove home, anticipation hinted at the new challenges ahead. He was ready to embrace them, ready to carve his own path in a world that no longer appeared insurmountable, a path where he and his colleagues could thrive, bolstered by the strength of both resilience and unity. Now as Jake moved forward, the horizon beckoned, and he felt a solid confidence that had long eluded him, a sense of clarity that he would conquer any obstacles ahead. This was his journey, and he was fully prepared to define every splendid possibility that unfolded before him. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.